I think we need to talk about SAO. When it comes to SAO, I have one of the most confusing and toxic relationships with this show. I loved it on my first watch, and then I grew to hate it. Then when one of my friends watched it, he liked it, and it kind of sparked up my enjoyment with the show again. But right now, I'm kind of at this point where I don't hate it, I don't like it really. I mean, it's just kind of meh. Don't get me wrong, season 3 and 4 are great, but the first two seasons just are not good. For a spoiler free summary, the show is just basically about this guy named Kirito that's playing a realistic VR MMORPG on the launch day, but the game developer, Akihiko Kaiba, locks all the players in the game, removing their logout buttons, and tells them that they must complete the game to escape. And if you die in the game, you die in real life. That's just basically like the most basic, without going into it too much, like summary of what happens. And the premise of the show is not bad. It's really just the execution in the first seasons that's like done poorly and draws the show back. I'm gonna start talking about spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen to any more of this. But I mean, the show isn't really worth not watching this video, if I'm being honest. Usually I'd tell you here, like, don't watch this, but I don't know if you'd really want to sit through all these episodes anyway, so you might as well just watch this video. SAO's first half of season 1 is actually pretty decent. I mean, it's pretty fun to watch the adventures that unfold in this like fictional VR world, and the episodes were actually pretty fun to watch. I mean, it was enjoyable, but the problem was the pacing. It's so bad. Like, I'm pretty sure if my memory serves me right, the first episode was like day 1 of being trapped in the game, right? And the second episode was like a week later, whatever, that's fine.
Since the game began, a whole month has gone by.
And then the third episode was like 2 months later or something like that. Like, bruh. And it ain't the only time that happens. Those drastic time jumps happen a lot throughout the supposed 2 years in the game that got condensed only into 14 episodes, which is my other issue. The Sword Art Online game should have been a full season. Instead of the very rushed first half and the horrible second half, we could have just not gotten that terrible second half at all and just gotten what happens in the first 14 episodes, but like expanded upon into more episodes. It would have been a lot nicer than what we ended up getting. And that leads me into the shitty second half of the first season. So, they managed to escape the game in the 14th episode and go back to the real world again, right? The way that they prolong the show to be a full season is by keeping the main character Kirito's love interest, Asuna, captive in a new fairy game, and Kirito has to now venture into this new game and save Asuna, and along the way they meet friends and battle enemies. Sounds not too bad, right? Yeah, well, the girl that he meets and that has a crush on him in this game is actually his real-life sister. Yep, I didn't misspeak there. And if that wasn't weird enough, we also have to watch as these weird alien slug things practically rape Asuna, and the bad guy of the arc who trapped Asuna in the game just gropes her. Like, seriously, what the fuck? Anyway, so that fucked up and literally practically pointless arc comes to an end, and we get on to Season 2 of SAO. The second season, I don't really remember that much of because I watched the show like around a year ago, and when I rewatched the series, I literally just skipped the second season because of how boring I remember it was. But I think I remember like the basic plot points, so here we go. There's a new game out on the market called Gun Gale Online, and there's this one player in it called Death Gun that logs on, and every time he shoots someone in the game, they die in real life. Sounds kind of interesting, right? And it's got that like die in the game, die in real life vibes that the beginning had, and so it's interesting. Yeah, it sounds good. Sounds good, right? But they stretched this out over another like 14 episodes, where instead of feeling rushed like the original season, it just felt way longer than the arc needed. And throughout, it's not like we're slowly learning new hints to solve the case. Nah, it's literally just that they figure it all out in like an episode or two. The time spent in the season is actually mostly spent with Kirito and this random ass girl named, I think, like, Sinon? I'm not mistaken. Which, while being a pretty uninteresting character, she does have like a good backstory of her like having to shoot a guy when she was a younger child in real life to like protect herself, and so she kind of has like PTSD over guns in the real life, and she uses like Gun Gale Online to help get over that. And so, like, I like that aspect of her character, but I'll keep it real with you. Even with a kinda interesting backstory like that, they really couldn't get me to care for her character at all, no matter how hard they tried. She felt so one-dimensional and boring to me. Yeah, and also Sinon almost gets raped by some dude that she was friends with. Yeah, like the writers of the show just got some major fucking issues. And then there's like 4 straight filler episodes about this like Excalibur weapon that they try to receive, which I'm pretty sure never ends up getting used anyway. So I'm just left here being like, uh, what was the point of it? After all that bullshit, we finally reached the redeeming factor of the season, which is the last around 6 episodes, I believe, which were actually done really well. Like I said before, I don't really remember a whole lot of what happens, so my memory might serve me incorrectly here, but I believe what happens is Asuna meets this like really powerful girl named Yuki in one of the VR games, and she becomes friends with her. Asuna asks her to join their guild, and she gets rejected. The reason, which we don't find out until like later on, is that Yuki's actually very ill and doesn't have much time left in her life. All Yuki wants to do is to beat a dungeon boss, so that way her name will forever be like engraved into the game, even after she passes on. So they end up accomplishing this, and Yuki dips immediately, leaving Asuna to be like, "What the fuck, Yuki?" Asuna just can't seem to understand why she keeps distancing herself from her. And so she finds out where Yuki is in real life somehow. I don't know how, I forget, and I don't care to look it up or watch the episodes back. And that's where she learns why Yuki tried not to let Asuna get too attached. Which is, like I said before, because she's ill and going to die soon. In the finale, we watch as every single person in the game stands around Yuki as a sign of respect while she reaches the end of her life.
We can't let you go without saying goodbye. It's not right. We're all praying for you, that your next journey will be to a place as wonderful as this.
Yuki then dies in Asuna's arms.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
There were also like some scenes with Asuna and her mom towards the end of the season, which I remember really liking those scenes, but I really couldn't tell you what actually happened, like, in it. I just remembered liking it, so I figured I should also mention it. So, in conclusion, that boring ass season was saved by those last episodes being actually really solid. Next up are season 3 and 4, which I actually liked a lot. They were legitimately solid seasons all throughout. Season 3 starts out with Kirito being stabbed by like this poisonous thing in the real world that was important in season 2, but I didn't mention. By one of the only surviving members of the Murder Guild from the original SAO world in the first 14 episodes, and it ends up leaving Kirito in a coma-like state. Some scientist dude then puts Kirito's body into this machine that simulates life, but with all AI citizens in that world, and that's basically the setting for this season. The reason he's put into the machine in the first place is because, if I recall correctly, like the machine slowly repairs something in your brain called a fluctlight the longer you're in it. I don't remember what a fluctlight exactly is, but it's something that's like very important. So yeah, just trust me on this. From now on, just to clarify, I'm gonna call the world that Kirito was put into the AI world, and I'm gonna call the real world, well, the real world.
This guy's a fucking genius.
Kirito is now in this AI world with none of his old friends and tries to adapt to life. Kirito ends up living in this machine for like a lot of years in the AI world, but because time moves incredibly faster in the AI world than in the real world, I'm pretty sure Kirito literally lives out like multiple years in the span of about a week or two in the actual world. In the AI world, he meets this guy named Eugeo and a girl named Alice, and one day they go somewhere they ain't supposed to go and get in big boy trouble. Alice trips and falls, and in classic storytelling fashion, her finger just barely is inside the Forbidden Lands boundary line, which is illegal, and then she's promptly taken away by the knights to be executed. You know, pretty normal stuff so far. Many years later, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh find Alice still alive, and she's working as an Integrity Knight, which are basically the strongest and most honorable people in the land. Also, the people that took her away to be executed, but whatever. I'm sure that Alice remembers them, and she'll stop being an Integrity Knight, and, she'll go back to her friends, she'll go back to her friends Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh, of course she will.
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Her memories were wiped. Alice then, not remembering who they are, tries to get both of them executed since they had just murdered some guy. Yeah, so to elaborate on that, there's this episode where these, two upperclassmen try to rape these younger students that Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh have been training at their school, which, at this point, you shouldn't be surprised about. The show has a horrible obsession with that. Anyway, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh both stop the dudes, and one of them is killed, which, as you can imagine, murder is illegal in the AI world too, which is kind of weird though, because does that mean that rape isn't then? Because the people seem like they were just gonna let it happen, so... The show was fucked. While in custody by Alice at the big cathedral thingy, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh break out of their cell, get their weapons back, and start climbing the cathedral and battle Integrity Knights. Of course, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh beat them and shit because plot armor, and Alice and Kirito also bond after being stuck on the edge of the huge-ass cathedral, and they have to, climb the side of the building all the way to the top to get back inside at one point. I don't know, it happens because of some reason, I don't really remember. I know this sounds really dumb, but it's actually, the best season of the show, so you're just gonna have to trust that, but Yu-Gi-Oh ends up making it to the top by himself and is greeted by the bad guy, the Administrator, who's actually this really attractive girl, and she persuades Yu-Gi-Oh into siding with her because she says she'll give him all the love he wants, and also cause them titties. Kirito and Alice eventually make their way to the top together too, now completely trusting each other, and Kirito fights against Yu-Gi-Oh, who is now kind of brainwashed by the Administrator. Yu-Gi-Oh actually wins the fight and encases both Kirito and Alice in ice, but Yu-Gi-Oh ends up snapping out of it and turns on the Administrator, tries to stab her, but ultimately fails that. Kirito and Alice then break free of the ice and join Yu-Gi-Oh to face off against Administrator as a team. Yu-Gi-Oh ends up dying during the fight, and I'm almost certain that this man's literally turned into a sword after death, if I'm not mistaken. This shit all sounds really stupid, I know, but I swear it's actually a good season. Just, you gotta believe me, I'm not crazy, I swear. Kirito ends up beating the Administrator, but some, terrorists in the real world end up hijacking the submarine that Kirito and the machine are in, and they cut off the main power supply, keeping Kirito in the AI world, also frying his brain.
They're cutting the power! The screw propellers are going down!
When I say frying his brain, I don't mean, killing him frying, but I mean more of, it turns him into a semi-permanent vegetable. And that's how Season 3 ends, and we're now on to the most recent season, Season 4. The season begins with Alice basically just driving a non-responsive Kirito in a wheelchair for the entirety of the first episode. Two of the terrorists on the submarine go into the AI world through the same type machine that Kirito's using. They end up becoming leaders of the underworld section of the AI world, and basically start up a war against the normal people of the AI world. Alice, along with a bunch of other Integrity Knights, fight against the Underworld's forces, and this war basically is the whole plot of the season. So there isn't that much to talk about with this season, if I'm being honest. But one thing I really liked about this season is that since Kirito is kind of sidelined for the whole season, it gives a lot of room for side characters to shine, which is a nice change from how the side characters are usually treated in SAO. But even with them getting more screen time, they still aren't important enough for me to need to talk about them in this video with you, so I'm not going to, but Just know that they are treated better, at least in this season, than normal. Towards the end of the war, Asuna finally goes into the machine to save Kirito, using a super OP pre-save character that has godlike abilities that the people on the submarine just have for some reason. When Asuna finally meets up with Kirito, he's still in his vegetable-like state, and they have a touching reunion in the AI world, and it's actually a pretty nice scene.
It's alright, Kirito. I'm here now.
There's also like some race war shit that happens where like American people that got given like copies of the AI world then like go into the AI world, and there's like thousands of American people that log on to it that are trying to kill the Japanese people, which are like the main characters. It's pretty weird, honestly, and kind of funny when I'm saying it out loud. While all that's going on, both Sinon and Kirito's incestual sister from the first season, Suguha, log on to the world to help Asuna. I guess it's just not a closed-off world anymore, and I guess just everyone and their mom suddenly have access to this world, but whatever. I mean, don't read too deep into it. It's SAO. Oh, yeah, and get this. SAO, of course, in keeping up with their fucked up streak of having at least one unwanted sexual encounter every season, had Suguha get groped by tentacles, just like what happened to Asuna back in season 1. Why? Anyway, Kirito ends up coming back to normal, and the main characters end up winning in the end and defeat the terrorists in the VR world, but it isn't all happy days for the characters. You see, the terrorists, now back in the real world, initiate the maximum acceleration sequence, which means that the time in the AI world will go by incredibly fast compared to the normal world's time. Like, I'm talking everyone in the VR world will be stuck in the world for like 200 years if they don't make it to the world end altar to escape the world in time. Luckily, everyone does make it there in time. Except for Kirito. He was busy defeating the last terrorists and couldn't make it to the altar in time, and now has to spend 200 years alone with none of his friends in the AI world. He breaks down, realizing how miserable his life is going to be without any of his friends or his girlfriend for the next 200 years. Except, it's revealed that Asuna stayed behind to stay with Kirito. You might think that that'd be some bullshit here where they find a way out of the world, but nope. Kirito and Asuna legitimately end up living out like 200 years together in the AI world, and I believe they become like the king and queen or some shit. I don't really remember too much, but something like that. After the 200 years, they come back and they tell everyone what happened during those years, and it's actually pretty fucked up. Because as we then see the current 200-year-old Kirito and Asuna's like, I think like Kirito's consciousness gets transferred into like a cube where he can like still talk, but like his body's now like inhabited by a consciousness of himself that doesn't remember what happened during those 200 years. So while it's still Kirito, like technically, like, the Kirito that we've known is actually in the cube, and this is just a different version of Kirito that's now in his body, I guess, because he doesn't remember everything that's happened. Like, he doesn't remember the 200 years. And then Asuna's memory, I'm pretty sure, just gets wiped completely. Like, she doesn't even get put in a cube. She just forgets all that stuff. Don't really know why all that happened. It's probably gonna, like, kill them or something. I don't know. That's just my guess. But I literally don't remember. None of that probably even made any sense, but I don't really care to put it in simpler terms, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. The fourth season ends with Kirito, Asuna, and Alice, who is able to be converted into a realistic robot body since she's an AI. They end up revisiting the AI world, and when they go back, it's been like many generations later because of the acceleration sequence, and it looks like the theme for the next season will be outer space. We got confirmation in the final episode that there will be a season 5, which is pretty cool. I'm a bit excited considering season 3 and 4 were actually pretty enjoyable, but even still, considering how there's a lot of like space elements, and with SAO's just horrible track record so far, I'm skeptical. Wow, I am stupid. That the season will even be good. That went on for way longer than it probably needed to, but I'm just gonna give my final thoughts now. SAO is objectively a pretty bad series, but it's got some really good moments and it's gotten a lot better over time. The characters had potential to be interesting, but they never really got enough screen time to be fully fleshed out. The plot was also disappointing, considering, being trapped in a video game where if you die in a game, you die in real life is a good concept, but the issue is that we only really got 14 episodes with that, and then the rest of the series had almost nothing to do with Sword Art Online, the title, so that is kind of stupid. And if I have to keep it 100 with you, I actually really did enjoy watching Kirito and Asuna's relationship develop in the show. But even then, there's a show that did it better anyway. You know what that show is? SAO Abridged, baby! Yeah, that's right. The fan-made parody with different dubbed lines is legitimately a better show in every way possible. I'm not going to actually get into Abridged right now, because I think it deserves its own video. But, I gotta tell you, if you're going to watch the first season of SAO, maybe just watch Abridged, to be honest. It's kind of just a better version of SAO and what it should have been. My final rating for the show is a 6 out of 10. Don't know what to do for an outro, so see ya!